Thank you all so very much for joining us for this live program, really one-of-a-kind program. Thanks so much, of course, to Mr. Mario Derksen of NovaSodaWatch.org, who is joining us for the show to co-host the show. We've got multiple guests coming on, as everyone probably knows by now, to talk about, well, who are we talking about? We're talking about the 10-year man himself, Mr. Jorge Bergoglio. Now, we're going to have multiple guests coming on for different segments as the show goes on, but we're going to start out, well, with just me and Mario. And Mario, well, he's one of the experts, of the entire theme of the craziness of Jorge Bergoglio. Mario might be the expert. So, Mario, thank you so much for coming in. What do you have to say for yourself?
Well, I want to say that after 10 years of Jorge Bergoglio, I'm really happily surprised I survived. It's been absolutely catastrophic covering the man. And I think a lot of people watching right now will agree that no matter, whether they're sedevacantist or not, something is really, really wrong with the man who calls himself Pope Francis. Now, Kevin, do you want to maybe put up a picture of Bergoglio right after his election in Vatican City on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, just as the conclave ended? There we go. March 13th, 2013. Probably everybody will remember where they were when they saw those images for the first time. And I don't know about you, Kevin, but there was something utterly creepy, I thought, when he stepped out. And I think you have another image you can put up. The thing is, he didn't smile, at least not at first. It was just very odd. And back then,
that seems like a very happy face. What are you talking about?
Show the other picture again.
Very, very, very pleasant.
Oh, wait, not no, wrong one. It was just, and of course, he was also not wearing the stole, or I'm sorry, I forget what it's called, the traditional garb that he's supposed to wear. And then, of course, you've got that ugly, hideous crucifix, pectoral cross that he's wearing. And I think the late Father Anthony Chicana said it had all the grace and style of a bottle opener or something. And it was just, yeah, those are just images that if you're not a fan of Jorge Bergoglio, you probably do not have very good memories associated with him stepping out on the balcony. Now, 10 years of Jorge Bergoglio, that is 3,652 days. And during those 3,652 days, we heard a lot from him about things like encounter, tenderness, joy, migrants, and dignity, about journeys, mercy, clericalism, and peripheries, about horizons, fraternity, and indifference, about touching the wounded, caressing the elderly, and including the marginalized, about the God of surprises, the smell of the sheep, the cry of the earth, and field hospitals. We heard about walking together, welcoming migrants, and accompanying the wounded, about warming hearts, eschewing rigidity, and dreaming of the future, about tearing down walls, building bridges, and of course, moving forward. Now, Kevin, could you show a picture of the collected speeches, interviews, and magisterial documents of Jorge Bergoglio of the last 10 years, a special edition that's currently being prepared in the Vatican? Do we have that ready, Kevin? There it is. Excellent. Although I do want to clarify that is volume 1. I don't know how many volumes the full collection is going to be. Well, folks, obviously we're joking, but it has been an incessant amount of blather from Francis over the last 10 years. And not just blather, of course, but a whole lot of scandals, a whole lot of confusion, a lot of ambiguity, a lot of just chaos, absolute and utter chaos. I've been calling him Chaos Frank for the longest time. And I thought it was pretty evident where this was going to go early on. So, you had a lot of spin doctors, a lot of, pundits and would-be experts like Michael Voris, for example, telling you how incredibly conservative this new pope was. And for the longest time, he tried to keep up that facade of Francis, the Orthodox conservative, and model Catholic or whatever. And, everybody else was long realizing that this man is a disaster. But at Church Militant, you still heard about, either you heard nothing, right? At some point, I called Voris's vortex, I called it the ignore-tex, because you sure weren't going to hear anything bad about Francis there. And then it took him until 2018 to finally start really speaking out against Francis. And
so when did you realize? When was it? So you said you kind of knew it from the beginning. Why was that? Was it because of his appearance at the moment of becoming supposedly the Pope?
It was clear from the beginning that he wouldn't be a valid Pope, for various reasons. For one thing, he was a Novus Ordo cardinal chosen in the Novus Ordo conclave, adhering to the Vatican II religion. Of course, you're not going to get a Pope from that. But and that wasn't. So it wasn't terribly difficult to figure that out. But what I thought was interesting is seeing all the initial, supposed experts give their commentary, especially as things were starting to deteriorate. And of course, you understand, these people believe he's the Pope. So of course, at first, they're going to try to put a positive spin on everything. So, there's a certain leeway, and so on, that you want to grant to people who are in error about his status. But, at some point, it simply became ridiculous. And I brought here a book that some people may remember or may not, or maybe never even have heard of it. And I think it didn't age well. It is rather amusing to put this up now. But What Pope Francis Really Said, a book by Tom Hoops. And this came out kind of late. It was 2016, as late as 2016. There were still people trying, we call them Pope-splainers at this point, right? This is about 150 pages or so, 130 pages of trying to explain that, no, all these terrible things you heard about Francis, they're really not terrible. It was all a big misunderstanding. It's not what he meant. It's not what he said. It was mistranslated. It was whatever. He was having a bad day. That worked maybe for the first few months, maybe even for the first year. But, I think the breaking point came, well, actually, I think for a lot of people, the breaking point came with Amoris Laetitia, and we can talk about that later. I know Louis Verrecchio is going to have something to say about that. But, there was so much going on with Francis in the last 10 years. It's very hard. First of all, it was very hard to keep track of even most things. And, there's a lot of stuff that we're all familiar with, right? Because it really made the news. And so especially Amoris Laetitia, right? The communion for unrepentant adulterers. You had, of course, his supposed humility and all that, right? And you have, of course, the Abu Dhabi Declaration, the document on human fraternity, in which he declares that God wills the diversity of religions just as he wishes the diversity of sexes and colors and races and languages and so on. So these are some of the big hitters that everybody knows about, but there is really a lot of stuff, a lot of small stuff that either has been forgotten since then or that never really made it onto a lot of people's radar, simply because there was just so much happening. And, people have lives to live and they can't always be checking the news about the supposed Pope.
And they should be following Novus Ordo Watch.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Novus Ordo Watch does that and takes care of that, so you don't have to.
Exactly.
But I'd like to just list a few things. And really, these are really just a few things. I mean, there's so much. You have about like 2 or 3, sometimes 2 or 3 big scandals a week at times. So let me just mention some things that people may not have heard about in the last 10 years. And some of these are worse than others. Not everything is a huge scandal, but most of it is really bad. So, for example, in the very beginning, in March of 2013, Francis told a journalist that he should just call him Jorge. Francis has said that his favorite exorcist is a Lutheran. Francis, in the last 10 years, has redefined in a document the concept of truth. He kissed an occult crucifix at World Youth Day in Rio de Janeiro in 2013. And let me just mention that all of the things I'm going to go through here, all of these we can document, okay? And if time allows, we're going to put up the links and everything in the show notes so people can verify these things. So this isn't just, me making claims. We can back up every single one of these things. Francis has said that the Catholic Church needs Anglicans as Anglicans. He has said that if you're in an area where there is no Catholic Mass, but there is an Anglican Mass, and there's a Sunday obligation, it's Sunday or a holy day, then you can just go to the Anglican Mass. He has said that Martin Luther, the founder of Protestantism, was not wrong on justification. He has repeatedly used perverted terminology from this homosexual underworld, okay? I don't want to elaborate on that in this broadcast. He has cracked jokes about the Holy Trinity. In one of his books that he composed as a cardinal, he joked about the crucifixion of our Lord. He has said that Jesus becomes bread in the Holy Eucharist, that Christ is contained in a piece of bread. He has told people not to be afraid of the last judgment. He believes in ecumenical martyrs. When his friend Tony Palmer died, I believe it was 2014, Tony Palmer was I believe the proper designation is, let me see. He was both an Anglican and also, I believe, an evangelical. He was kind of a mix of those two. And, but he was an Anglican evangelical bishop, okay? And when Tony Palmer died, Francis said that he should receive a Catholic bishop's burial. Francis has said that religious differences between religions, are necessary. He has said that the worst sin a missionary can commit is proselytism. And he has said that the least serious sins are the sins of the flesh. All of these things we can prove, and we're going to provide the links. Now, this was just a very, very small sample. There is plenty more, and on Novus Ordo Watch, we have a whole page just on Francis where you have an endless number of links. And later, Kevin, later in this broadcast, we can talk about some more. And, in general, after 10 years of Francis in action, I think we can summarize things as follows. The man has no zeal for the glory of God. He has no care for the salvation of souls. He has no care for the supernatural, especially not the life of sanctifying grace. His focus is mostly on the temporal world and not on eternity. He does not have the Catholic faith, that is evident. And really, religion is not that important to him. For him, the important thing is making the world a better place. And so we've seen in the last 10 years that with Francis, everything is really kind of inverted. Up is down, left is right, right is wrong. And he really likes using terminology and then giving it a different meaning. So for example, he likes to denounce perversion, but he means clericalism. Okay. So when he's railing against clericalism, he's happy to call it a perversion. On the other hand, when we're talking about, what kind of perversion, he'll say, who am I to judge? Right? Well, if the guy has goodwill, then, who cares? Remember, the least serious sins are the sins of the flesh, right? According to Francis. Now, of course, there are worse sins than the sins of the flesh. Of course, they're not the worst or the most serious sins. That's true. However, they are extremely serious because if fully consented to, they snuff out the life of grace in souls. And you do not have to be malicious, at least not for most sexual sins, I suppose. Weakness is sufficient. And that is what makes it so dangerous. A lot of people can fall into a sexual sin because of weakness. And our blessed Lord himself, of course, taught that even so much as having a deliberate lustful thought is already committing adultery, right, in your heart. So we're not talking about the least serious sins here. Then Francis likes to condemn blasphemy, but to him, blasphemy is hitting a woman. That is blasphemy to him. Sacrilege, too, he likes to denounce, but only when it's the sacrilege of war. Yes, he claims war is a sacrilege. Okay, it's nonsense, of course. Then moral obligations he has a real problem with. Those are rigid. That's rigidity. That's clinging to laws and rules and regulations. Unless, of course, he's talking about saving the planet. Then it's a moral obligation, right? And hey, Last Judgment is really nothing to worry about. But if you don't feed the hungry, you don't help out at the local soup kitchen, he will remind you that you're going to be judged for that.
Well, it's interesting too, Mario, as you go on this list. It's just incredible. One of the things I saw someone mention the other day, and they said that they changed their mind or left the Novus Ordo for traditional Catholicism because of what was the story where there was a little boy who came up to him with his hands folded, right? And I think Bergoglio almost he took his hands away and said, that's not the right way to do it. I don't know the exact story, but pretty crazy.
Yeah. There was some kind of liturgical function, and that one of the altar boys was standing there afterwards like that as he, the Pope walks past him, right? He was trying to be all pious and all that. And the boy was, I don't know, maybe about 10 years old. And Francis was doing this in a joking kind of way. So he as he passes him, he sees that he's standing there like that. And he tries to pry open his hands, and he says, "Oh, what about your hands? Are they stuck? Are they stuck together?" And then, he pries them open and says, "Oh, okay." So it was just, that wasn't the worst thing he did, but it just kind of, I think, expressed at that moment his contempt for even so much as trying to stand there reverently for God and for who he thought was the Pope. So it just, it's Bergoglio. So.
Well, you hear a lot of the times people twist that and say how it's just how it shows his humility and how he's one of the people. And it's like, well, why is it that he's the first one ever, like any Pope ever, to not understand the dignity of the office?
Yeah. Yeah. Humility is not something that man exudes. Okay. Right. He likes to exude, I think, the appearance of humility, but true humility is difficult. I certainly, it certainly is, but for everybody's always gushing over how humble he is. No, he's not. And, a humble person does not joke about our Lord's crucifixion, right? A humble person does not govern the way he governs. People think he's all about including the marginalized or including the excluded and reaching out to the marginalized, but that's not true. Actually, what Francis likes to do is simply swap out one group of marginalized people for another. He's marginalized plenty of people in his church, especially his traditionalists, right? I mean, they are dirt to him. And so it's just that, if you put the peripheries in the center, as his lingo goes, obviously you're pushing the center to the peripheries. So you're just swapping out one group for another is all it is. It's not an actual inclusion of the marginalized. It's just he's got his enemies. He's got his the people that he wants to see marginalized, and that's been very, very evident, right? And I don't want to carry on too long here because I know we've got guests waiting. So,
well, no, we're waiting. We're waiting on Father Oswald, but he hasn't arrived yet in the live stream. So it's fine. It's totally fine to go on as you're going. But it's also, unfortunately, I have to say to everyone watching that Father Benedict Hughes will not be able to make it to the stream. Unfortunately, I hope everyone understands that we would love to have his opinion. He's a priest who has priestly duties and priestly issues that unfortunately came up. Mm-hmm. And so he is unable to join. We are waiting for Father Oswald to, could be technical issues. Who knows? It could be priestly duties. We don't know, but we are waiting for him. We also have Steven Speray on the line waiting to jump in. So we do have people coming on, but we'll wait for Father Oswald a little bit more. So Mario, if you have more of the list, please keep on going. I mean, it's just unbelievable. You just spent the first 20 minutes of the show easily, fluidly, just saying bit by bit different issues that he's done, different ones. Like you haven't spent any minute on one issue. It's all been different. That's unbelievable.
Yes. A lot of talk. There has been a lot of talk about the so-called Francis effect. And, I think there are many facets to that, of course, but I think fundamentally among those people who are not sedevacantists, in other words, those who, try to practice Catholicism and, they mean to be good Catholics, but they believe him to be the Pope. Among those people, Francis has basically formed two camps, or rather two camps have formed in response to Francis. There are those who have tried to make Francis fit into the papacy, and there are those who have tried to make the papacy fit Francis. And so among those who have tried to make Bergoglio fit into the papacy, we see like what we would call like the conservative Novus Ordos or the mainstream Novus Ordo people like Jimmy Akin of Catholic Answers or Tim Staples, right? Dr. Robert Fastigi, Dave Armstrong, and just those people who have tried to explain away anything disturbing of Francis, anything heretical, right? Who have gone out of their way to argue that, whatever, Amoris Laetitia is absolutely fine, and so on, because they understand the papacy. They know that it's not possible for the Pope to do, for example, what Francis did in his so-called apostolic exhortation Amoris Laetitia, with a communion for unrepentant adulterers, among other things. So they have tried to do everything in their power to, quote unquote, explain Francis in such a way that he hasn't violated any of those things, right? That any of the parameters, if you will, of the papacy. And also that's where that book comes in, right? That I showed earlier, what Pope Francis really said, okay? And then there are those who maybe started off like that, but realized after a while, this is just not sustainable. And it's, from a certain point onwards, just not honest. We can't continually spin Francis's words and actions to make them fit the papacy. But what they did is actually worse, or at least arguably worse, and they tried to modify the papacy so that they can fit Francis into it. And chief among those is Dr. Peter Kwasniewski, right? Other big names that tried to do that for a while and maybe are still doing it are Steve Skojec, Eric Sammons, and Timothy Flanders, for example. Also, people associated with the remnant, Michael Matt, I think perhaps somewhat. And obviously, both of these things are problematic. But they all derive from the common, how should I say, from the common, I guess, refusal to say that Bergoglio is not the Pope. It's amazing, but it is this position of anything but sedevacantism, right? They simply will not go there. And I understand that you can have difficulties with sedevacantism. I understand there are a number of questions that do not have, or that still need to be answered, right? That do not have clear answers. But the solution is not to live in a fantasy world, right? And so Francis has definitely formed those two camps, right? And then after a while, there formed a third camp. And it is those people that said, indeed, it is impossible that Francis be Pope. Gee, maybe Benedict XVI still is. Okay, maybe Francis was not validly elected because Benedict XVI actually didn't resign validly. And those we called the resignationists, right? Other names for that position were Benedict is Pope, the Bippers, right? Or let's see,
Benevacantis.
Benevacantism, right? It was that was funny. And among those, among representatives of that position, you've had Anne Barnhart, Patrick Coffin, Bishop Henry Gracida, or is it Rene Henry? I can't remember now. Archbishop Lenga in, I'm trying to remember now, is he from Kazakhstan? But those are the only Novus Ordo bishops that I can think of that actually espouse that position. And I believe Louis Verrecchio was part of that group for a while. And now I know even among those people who believe that Benedict was Pope until his death, there are two camps as far as why he didn't resign validly. Some believe that he didn't resign validly because of a mistake he made, and others believe he didn't resign validly on purpose. And then, of course, some people actually did become sedevacantists, like Louis Verrecchio, even though he doesn't use that term. And then tragically, there are others still who gave up completely and became apostates, like Steve Skojec. Okay, he's, I think, currently wondering if there is a God, or if there is, whether he is good. So that's utterly tragic. But it is the result of logic. If you reject sedevacantism, if you will not consider that, and you insist that Francis must be the Pope, then you will believe in a defected papacy, and then you ultimately abandon the faith altogether. Yes. All right. I think we can stop right here. And how's it looking with Father Oswald?
I've not heard from Father Oswald, so we're going to go right to Steve Speray and bring in Father Oswald hopefully directly after.
All right.
Steve Speray is good friend of the show. Let's put him on the outside over there. Steve is a good friend of the show. He's been on a couple times. A Catholic apologist, we call him. He also has a blog over at, let me see if I can find that. I got these things already, but then when I actually need them, I'm not ready. At stevensperay.wordpress.com. Steve, thanks for joining us. And you've kind of heard this. I don't know what you want to call it. Mario just saying all the issues with Bergoglio, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. I mean, what's your perspective? I know you've had a I guess quote unquote conversion from Novus Ordo to traditional Catholicism. I mean, what with Bergoglio?
So my conversion was John Paul II, and you basically just see a continuation of the revolution, right? So We kind of forget how bad John Paul II was. I thought he was terrible. And we kind of forget about that because, Bergoglio is the guy there now, and we see all his nonsense. But I remember the nonsense back in 20 years ago. And there's a lot of people I hear, they probably don't never heard of sedevacantism. I've got friends that are going to watch this, and who are we to judge these guys who claim to be the popes? And very simple thing I was thinking about before I came on was, and articles that I've written, is does Bergoglio fit the Vatican I definition of a pope? Does he remove all occasion of schism? He's a schismatic, not just a heretic. He's also a schismatic because of how he operates. And you can read Torquemada's explanation on how a pope can go into schism. It's fascinating, but you'll see that Bergoglio falls into that. Does he stand firm against the gates of hell? He is the gates of hell. He forms parts of it because the gates of hell are what? The heretics and their heresies. So I've argued in the past that the Pope, Pope Benedict XV declared that the popes are the gates of the church. So the reason why a pope can't be a heretic because the gates of hell can't also be the gates of the church. Well, you have the church would be hell, and that actually that's what you have with the Novus Ordo religion. It's hell, as far as I'm concerned. And but anyway, when you first contacted me to ask what would I like to talk about with Bergoglio, three things pop out. Every time I think of Bergoglio, there's three things that always pop out, and the first thing is the death penalty. And I know some other podcasters are trying to explain away his teaching on the death penalty, but I mean, this thing here is the death penalty is it's been part of the faith since the beginning. You find it in the scriptures, and in fact, the church actually condemned as heretical those who went against the death penalty. You'll see that all going all the way back to the 13th century. And St. Robert Bellarmine, he said one of the chief heretical beliefs of the Protestants was they were against the death penalty. What I find fascinating is that one of the condemnations against Martin Luther was that he says it was against the spirit to burn heretics. That was condemned. According to Francis, Luther was right. It would be against the spirit to burn heretics if the death penalty is immoral. And that's exactly what Francis is saying. He says that it's inadmissible because it's contrary to the gospel. It violates the dignity of the human person. He's basically telling us that it's intrinsically evil. Because if it violates the dignity of the human person today, then it obviously would have violated it in the past. So there's a classic example of modernism.
Yeah, and notice, I'm sorry if I could just jump in for a second. Notice he deliberately avoided using the term intrinsically evil, right? He was very clever. He said inadmissible, right? And didn't he say per se, contrary to the gospel or whatever? And, the effect is the same, but that's, of course, the loophole for his apologists who are trying to defend him. But it's simply not true. The death penalty is very much in harmony with the gospel and is actually endorsed in the New Testament.
He also said it was an inhuman measure. So if it's contrary to the gospel. So if it's contrary to the gospel and is an inhuman measure, what does that mean? It can only mean that it's intrinsically evil. What's interesting, they made the change in the catechism. I want to say it was on the feast of St. Alphonsus Liguori.
Oh, is that right?
And he had something to Alphonsus Liguori, he actually talked about the death penalty and said it was lawful and it was a duty. It's a duty to execute certain people. So you have the Roman Catechism also talks about the death penalty, and it's one of the things that I remember it saying was that it's an act of paramount obedience to the commandment which prohibits murder. So it's
right.
But John Paul II, he also condemned the death penalty for most of the time. He left a way out and said it should be a very rare thing, but his reasoning for it was wrong. So, he just continued. That's another thing. Francis also said that in his explanation that it's a development. The church is changing. It's the law of progress, and he's saying that there is no real. It doesn't contradict the past. And he actually says that his new teaching does not contradict the past teaching. So he I don't know what he's thinking, but if he can do that with the death penalty, he can do that with everything. He can do that with artificial contraception. He could do it with women ordination. He could do that with homosexual marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And say, well, we're not really contradicting the past. It's just this is the law of progress, and the church is understanding and understanding itself better.
But to me, it seems like it just shows that a lot of people who follow him and still say, okay, this must be fine. They don't actually truly understand the church, right? And that the church cannot err. It has to be continuously, the same. You can't go and change certain things that have been taught. I mean, like that. And it seems like a very basic thing, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's something that's been taught, I suppose, in the last 6 months.
Well, you see, for Francis, the death penalty is absolutely inadmissible because he's basically a naturalist, right? He really just believes in the natural world, and so to end our natural life, that is the greatest possible evil, right? So he must be against the death penalty. And
I'm going to say also this. I think, and it goes back to Vatican II, this idea of raising the dignity of man to a godlike stature. That, the reason why we execute people as a punishment, because look what it's an offense to God to murder someone that He created, and but now our dignity is raised to His level. You see that even in Vatican II. The first commandment, obviously the first commandment is to love God above all things, but Vatican II adds that the second commandment is equal to the first commandment. The way they say it, the love of neighbor is equal to the first commandment. Mm-hmm. And that's not exactly right. It's the love of God first, and then it's the love of neighbor. But Vatican II's got it together as if it's the same. Basically, it's the same commandment. So it raises man, or the dignity of man, to a. It's kind of the doctrine of Antichrist. You're making man God, mm-hmm. And if our dignity is that high, then death penalty is going to be wrong, right?
Yeah, so. Maybe we should mention also that, and a lot of people I think do not realize that. A lot of people will say, well, but why don't we just have life imprisonment instead of the death penalty? And, we could just do that instead of execution. Now, Francis, though, he's also opposed to life imprisonment. Mm-hmm. That just hasn't made the rounds very much yet, but he is absolutely against life sentences. He calls them a hidden death penalty, a hidden death sentence. Okay, and that corroborates what I just said about him. For him, natural life is all there is. I know you can find tons of quotes, of course, of him contradicting that. But when you look at what he focuses on and where his concern is, the man is all about the temporal world. That's his concern. That's his focus. The rest isn't that important to him, right? What religion you are or whatever. Who cares? The most important thing is you have fraternity and you do good, corporal works of mercy and that sort of thing. And of course, those things are important, right? Love of neighbor certainly is the second greatest commandment, and it correlates right to the first commandment, love of God. Like, you cannot love God if you don't love your neighbor. That's true. But he opposes even life imprisonment because he looks at it as, well, there is no more possibility of redemption. Well, there may not be in this life, but there is on the supernatural level, right? On the supernatural plane, you can, and of course the same goes for the death sentence, but if you're in prison for life, you can still attain the purpose for your existence. You can still attain the beatific vision in heaven. And if you do that, nothing is lost and everything is saved. But you see, that requires a supernatural view of things, right? Which Bergoglio doesn't have. Bergoglio thinks that if you're just rotting in prison for the rest of your life, that's it. Your life is over. There's no hope. It's nonsense. But it is true for a naturalist who only worries and only cares and only really admits the present life.
Well, that's the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of Bergoglio. The second thing is the Abu Dhabi Statement. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that in the beginning of the show. God wills the diversity of religions and sects. And, Athanasius Schneider had brought that to his attention because he obviously see that this is not right. And so when he tries to explain, what is this? I'm talking about permissive will. Well, what about sex? Because God permissively willed sex. And, he kind of ignored that with the Athanasius Schneider. But if the thing is, if he meant permissive will and positive will in the same sentence, well, God wills everything. Everything that happens in the world is either his permissive will or his positive will.
Right.
I mean, so what's the whole point? What's the point of the statement?
Right. Including, by the way, racism, right? And yet Francis would never accept a statement that says God wills racism. Right.
Everything that happens in this world, God permitted it. If he didn't positively will it, he at least permitted it, or it wouldn't have happened. So
right. Yes.
It's a dumb statement. So that stands out.
Steve, maybe you could explain real quick for people who may not be familiar with that. What is God's permissive will?
Well, we're talking about so God allows things to happen, and he, the question of evil, for instance, he allows evil in the world, but God he draws good out of it, but it happens because he permitted it to happen.
Right. And so some people were saying that, when he said God wills a diversity of religion, he really meant God tolerates. God does not prevent a diversity of religions, right? That was the argument.
Right. So obviously there's lots of religions in the world. Well, obviously God permitted it, or they wouldn't be in the world.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of his permissive will by the fact that they exist. But he's obviously lying, is what he's doing, and I think you pointed that out in an article. He's lying.
And we know, right? And we know that is not the correct interpretation, because in the same sentence, in the same breath, he is saying, he's listing the diversity of religions together with the diversity of sex, language, race, color, right? So.
Right.
And these obviously he didn't will merely permissively, but actively. Right? God actually desires there to be male and female. And by the way, only those two.
Right. Well, there's a Muslim imam that he signed this with them, right? So this is against the Islamic religion as well. It's so everybody's is guilty here. So it's just not Francis, it's the imam. I mean, I'm wondering how many Muslims he offended because they don't believe that nonsense either. So it just goes to show you just how the nonsense they do to in the spirit of fellowship, in world peace, they'll just say stupid stuff and sign these crazy documents. And this is this is the official teaching of the church now. It's been it's been placed in the Acta. It's part of the Vatican II religion. So
yes, that's right. That Abu Dhabi State, the Declaration on Human Fraternity, that he put it in the Acts of the Apostolic See and signed off on it. So
that's right.
That makes it official, whatever, papal, magisterial, whatever.
So it's nuts. And
so it's not just him talking,
on an airplane.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So this is as official as it can get in the church.
But it's not something he allegedly said. He signed this, right? So
yes.
And lastly, it's one thing to sign these documents and change the catechism, but here's the big one. It's when he appoints bishops. And he's appointing bishops, and you got to follow your bishop. Your bishop is in union with the Pope. You follow the bishop, just like you'd follow the Pope. He's your pastor. And so what does he do? I'm in the Lexington, Kentucky area, and he's appointed John Stowe. And John Stowe is a promoter of the LGBT culture and lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And this is, you see what's happening here. So he's got his priests all signing the documents that they're gonna be in union with their bishop and follow him in his LGBTQ culture. And this is bad. And this is really the schism. This is an act of schism when he starts doing this. Like if you were to go back and read Torquemada, I've got it sitting right in front of me because I just thought of it. The Pope, he says the Pope can separate himself from Christ either by disobeying the law of Christ or by commanding something that is against the divine or natural law. And by doing so, the Pope separates himself from the body of the church because this body is itself linked to Christ by obedience. In this way, the Pope would, without a doubt, fall into schism. So if you're pointing these pro-LGBTQ bishops who are part of this culture, this is an act of schism. So on that point alone, you got a problem. And we've had the sodomite priests and bishops all throughout history, but you've never had a so-called Pope who is initiating it and promoting it. This is totally different. And John Stowe here in Lexington, I mean, this guy, he blessed the Pride months. He blesses all the Pride events. One of the churches downtown Lexington, for instance, this is awful. But if you were to go to their website, St. Paul's Church in Lexington, they have titled Our Lady, Our Mother of Pride, and they've got a picture of her and our Lord draped in a rainbow flag. Mm-hmm. And they've got, yes, and it's unbelievable. But they have a Pride prayer cards in Lexington. Wow. So this is unbelievable.
John Stowe, yeah, he was appointed by Francis, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
No,
and I think he recently met with one another here, not within the last year or so. Mm-hmm. He's probably Francis' favorite bishop in the United States, honestly.
Yeah.
And who's that Jesuit?
Hellboy.
Yeah.
What's his
James
name?
Martin.
James Martin. Oh my goodness, I forgot his name. Well, he praised Stowe, and Stowe praises Martin. They're on the same team here, and they're doing the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I can't imagine. You look at the past, look at the true popes. Say Pius XII, St. Pius X. Can you imagine them having a sit down meeting or an hour-long interview with someone like James Martin and coming out smiling?
Yeah.
I mean, how is this hard to understand that this cannot be the same religion? It can't be. I mean, you cannot imagine another pope, a true pope, actually just being in the same room with someone like that. I can't even fathom it. And it's people overcomplicate this. It cannot be the same religion.
Hey, the German bishops just finished their synod, and they have now approved the blessing of same-sex unions. And it's just, if Rome approves this, well actually, I'm really hoping that Rome does, because that might finally get people to wake up and realize, okay, that's not the Catholic Church, and Rome is not Catholic. I mean, I don't know it's going to take something that drastic, but we're right there.
Yeah, I think, the synodal way in Germany actually comes in kind of handy for Francis, because he can always wag his finger and say, oh, you naughty boys over there, I oppose you. And that makes him look like a centrist by comparison, right? He is the moderate now. He's not as extreme. See, Francis is keeping the faith. He's orthodox because he's against the German synodal way. It's nonsense, of course. But it sure it allows him to appear conservative a little bit, by saying, well, so this way, everybody gets to say, well, he's not as bad as these guys over there. And if he were, then he would not be the Pope,
Right. So, I mean, if that doesn't get you, I don't know what will. I remember it was like 2014, I did a little thing called the Anti-State Syndrome. there's a syndrome, and there's different modes that people fall into when you try to explain this to them. I remember labeling some of them out like stupid mode, refusal to answer questions, playing dumb, making excuses, denying facts, or just being dishonest. I mean, these are some of the things that this is how they react when you bring this information to them. And they all do it. And they don't want to go there. And so they come up with these excuses.
I like how, it all started out with these, supposed expert commentators like Father John Zulstorf, right? And they're spinning everything. Remember, he had that thing going about, reading Francis through Benedict? Yeah. I just kept people going for a while, basically, here's your hermeneutical key to understand Francis. And he had to give that up at some point. Of course, it was just whatever. But, no, I liked how at first, when Francis did something or said something, that was just an interview, or that was just a side comment, or that's just this. Okay. And then he starts with the, then he says something in an official allocution, right, to cardinals or whatever. That's just a speech. And then, that's just an apostolic exhortation. And it kept going like that. And I'm saying, look, it's just, maybe he said that in Amoris Laetitia, but look, canon law wasn't changed. The catechism is still the catechism, yada, yada. Well, then he changed the catechism, okay, on the death penalty, right? And then there's, that's invalid. You can't have that. That's invalid. Like, oh, really? Like, you people are always talking about how you can't judge the Pope, and here you're presuming to overrule his decision, right?
Here's a question to ask: is there's those who know, there's members of the Novus Ordo religion that know this death penalty is heretical, it's wrong. But here's the question: is it okay to believe it? The church teaches it. It's in the catechism. Am I permitted to believe this?
That's really key. Yeah. It's not just about, do you have to believe it, right? Because everybody will say, it's not binding. I don't have to. But the bigger question is, are you allowed to?
Exactly.
Is it safe to embrace this?
Right. And what are they going to say?
It's
what are they going to say? Yeah. Say, I can't believe the catechism. I'm forbidden.
Right. Is it safe to believe that God wants there to be a diversity of religions? No, it's not safe to believe that. Because if that were so, then our Lord didn't speak the truth. Then our Lord is not the Messiah. Then our Lord is not God. Then Catholicism is a lie, right? And then also, by the way, then there is no papacy, right? Because if our if our Lord is not the Messiah, then obviously he didn't found the church, and then he couldn't institute the papacy. So that's why I once said on a podcast, even if Bergoglio is the Pope, he's not the Pope, in that sense, because then if he were the Pope, then the papacy would be a lie, in which case he wouldn't be the Pope, because then there is no such thing as a Pope, as the papal office.
So those are the things that stand out. Obviously, there's lots of other things. I remember when he first came in, I remember doing a little thing about him, and I remember he was bowing down. He was receiving blessings from all the Protestant ministers. You just see that.
Was that, when was that? Like 2015 or so?
Right. I'm talking about before he was elected.
Oh, okay.
So he was already.
Because I think he did it again, with charismatics.
Yeah, and his predecessors did the same things. I mean, John Paul II, and they received blessings from Protestant shamans, for instance. You got John Paul II received blessings from shamans. People forget that.
Well, and then okay.
We knew what we were in for when we saw that. So.
Yes, and maybe we should talk briefly about the. By the way, do we have Father Oswald waiting, Kevin?
Still not. So still waiting for Father. I think again, maybe something
paging
came
Father
up.
Oswald. Okay.
Exactly.
What was I going to say? Lost my train of thought now. But Maybe Steve, maybe you can say something briefly about regarding Bishop John Stowe. If John Stowe is in communion with Francis, and Francis is in communion with whatever, say, let's use Matt Gaspers, okay, of Catholic Family News. Well, doesn't that mean then that Matt Gaspers is in communion with John Stowe?
At least implicitly, that's exactly right. And I have a friend who joined a diocese that he claims is very orthodox and conservative. But I made the point, yes, but that diocese is it's united to the Diocese of Lexington. So it doesn't matter how conservative your diocese is; it's still in union. It's one in faith with the diocese.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's your. I've hammered this so many times. The mark of unity does not exist in any way, in any shape, or it does not exist. So if you don't believe what your Pope or your bishops and you have half the bishops in one side of the country and don't agree with the bishops on the other side, and you don't have unity. The unity of faith is not there.
I think that's a great point, because if you look at, let's see. So John Stowe, for example, Father Richard Rohr, the Franciscan New Age, whatever he is, Michael Voris, Bishop Richard Williamson, and let's use Michael Matt of the Remnant. These people don't have the same religion, and yet they all claim to be part of the same church.
That's exactly right. Well, Vigano has actually admitted this, right? That Francis is a head of two different religions. He says that. There's two different religions, and Francis is head of both of them. I mean,
that's great.
It's nuts.
Well, I think the best way, if you're not sure, what to think, is Francis the Pope? Is he not? Well, here's a very simple way you can resolve this for yourself. Go to the traditional Catholic teaching on the papacy. All right, whether you find that in the pre-Vatican II theology books or directly in the papal magisterial documents, right, the papal encyclicals, catechisms, and so on, look up that teaching, and for every mention of Roman pontiff, simply put in the name of Francis and see how it reads. If you cannot affirm these things of Francis that the Catholic teaching affirms of the Pope, well, then Francis cannot be the Pope.
Exactly. Just like what I said in the beginning, the Vatican I has laid it out, right?
Precisely. And notice we just resolved this entire problem without judging, without any sort of judging personal intentions or we've avoided all of these problems of who are you to say who's a heretic and all that. If you cannot affirm these things of Francis that the Catholic Church affirms of the Pope, well, then either you're wrong and you can affirm them of Francis, but then you'd have to be full-blown Novus Ordo apostate, right? Or he's not the Pope. I mean, it really is not that difficult. It may be unpleasant, and it may raise all sorts of other questions and problems, but it's not that difficult to figure this out, especially not after 10 years of Francis.
I've made the point that if he fulfills the Vatican I definition of what a pope is, then why would you have to judge him and depose him and all these things that the pseudo-trads keep coming up with? Well, again, the Vatican I clarified what all those theologians were discussing. What would happen if a pope did this or a pope become a heretic? And you do have theologians that say, well, he would just remain pope until he dies. Yeah. There are theologians that say that. But Vatican I clarifies it very clearly. If they do not fulfill that definition, there's no need to do anything because he is the Pope. And again, the gates of hell and the gates of the church cannot be one and the same thing. So,
and do you guys think? I really wonder why. Whoever's watching this, I'm sure there are people who are in the Novus Ordo. And do you think? It seems to me one of the stumbling blocks that people come upon is that they really connected mostly everything with the Latin Mass. And you've really seen that lately, that it's just, as long as I can go to Latin Mass, that's all that actually matters. And as you both have been saying, it's obviously not. I mean, it is a unity of faith, not just with everyone now, but with the past as well. And I think that's what it seems like people just kind of have a disconnect.
Mm-hmm. Well, altar girls was what converted me. I saw altar girls, women lectors, and that was it. I was done. I knew this can't be the Catholic Church. The church has already condemned these things. So I knew something was wrong there. But when I saw that Auctorum Fidei document by Pius VI, that was it.
Yes.
Oh, man.
That's a big one. Auctorum Fidei, Pope Pius VI. Yes.
That's a powerful document.
And that's covering women in liturgy, or?
Well, it talks about, what it says is that the disciplines of the church can't be harmful. You can't say there's anything wrong with the disciplines in the church. And we already have the church defining or declaring that women serving the sanctuary is evil. That's a direct quote, by the way. That's Pope Benedict XIV, I believe. He said it's evil. And he goes back to Pope Gelasius. Gelasius is explaining because it doesn't suit the sex, serving the sanctuary. This is part of creation. This is part of the divine law. Women can't serve the sanctuary because of our creation. It's, so it's not something that can be changed. It's evil. When Benedict XIV is saying this is evil, he's saying it's intrinsically evil. It's not evil because it's someone's doing it out of disobedience. It's not that disobedience is evil. He's saying that altar girls are evil. I see people try to explain. You see people try to explain this away, but it's nonsense when you start to say, "Well, he's just talking about those who are doing it, and they're just being disobedient because they haven't approved it." That's not what he's saying.
Yeah, and I mean we've moved way beyond altar girls.
Exactly.
Right there. Look, if for me it kind of comes down to if you can say that God positively wills other religions to exist, I mean at that point none of it matters. It's all over. It's all gone. That is so bad. That is apostasy. I mean, not even just the repudiation of Catholicism, it's the repudiation of any any religion that claims to be revealed. Because it means that God's revelation is false. It's just there's nothing left. So Bergoglio has really demolished it all. And interestingly enough, though, a lot of people, they don't respond to theological issues like that. Like it doesn't get them to realize Francis is not the Pope. They're more like, well, if they ever ordain women, then I'll know he's not the Pope. Excuse me, saying that God wills a diversity of religions is a lot worse than ordaining women.
I can tell you right now, if they ever do ordain women, those same people would say, "I'm just going to another church." I mean, they're going to another.
You move the goalpost.
All right, they wouldn't leave. They'll just go to another parish.
Yes, and that's why that point you brought up about the Latin Mass is really true, because now they're really upset at Francis because he's upset their apple cart. Now, it's one thing to say, he said something heretical or blasphemous or stupid in some interview, or even in a magisterial document, they can just ignore that. But when he's basically canceling, deleting their Sunday Mass, now it's personal, right? But unfortunately, it should be about the faith more than about the Mass, because you can have the Mass and not have the faith, and it will profit you nothing.
I like your commenter on Nova Sort of Watch, Burning Eagle. More. He wants to see more of it, and I'm right with him, because that's what it's going to take for some people to wake up. But it's got to be drastic. The blessing of the same-sex unions, that will definitely push a few people over. I know it would probably push my brother over. I think that might do it. So,
yeah, but do you think Francis is going to sanction that officially? That he's going to approve of it?
Something. Let's say he doesn't do anything. Would it be tacit approval if he does nothing?
Well, now and that would be totally Francis, right? Do nothing, and
that's exactly what I expect of him.
Have the journalists fight, or the commentators, whatever, fight over what that means, or if it means anything, and I think he gets a kick out of that.
Yeah, he'll have 4 cardinals write him a letter.
Look at the dubia, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay, I don't care. Do what you want, write what you want, say what you want. I'm just going to not say anything, and nobody's going to care.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah, it's incredible.
No, I think it's interesting though. I think it is, and you see it everywhere. I mean, I mentioned in a previous podcast that we were here in Germany probably 6 or 7 years ago now, and we went to a Novus Ordo church just for the shock of it, because my wife wanted to show me how ugly it was. And we walked in, and at the front of the door, seriously though, at the front of the door, like really right at the front of the door, there's a huge bust of Martin Luther. And this was at the Jubilee of Martin Luther, the 500 years or something. Or I forget what exactly.
Oh, well, hey, Francis had a statue of Martin Luther in the Vatican.
Yeah, and get this. So get this. On this bust of Martin Luther in a Catholic church, it said "One of Us."
Wow.
It's crazy. Like, you can't make it up. It's like, and
That's my
see
line.
this, and you can't make it up. Exactly. I listen to you too much, Mario. But it's so true that it's so bizarre that it's like, what point is it going to be when people are like, okay, this can't be the Catholic Church? I mean, it's a pope, supposedly, is saying that Martin Luther, who's one of the heretics of all time, is one of us. What are we doing here? Mario, you said it great earlier. I mean, what's the, if all religions are equal, heck, I'm going to go pick an easier one. I'm going to go pick one that doesn't have Lent, because heck, if I'm going to go to heaven with one that doesn't have Lent, then I may as well do it, right?
Well, and I like to add that, look, if that were all true, right, all religions are equal, it doesn't really matter, well, then you might as well be a sedevacantist. Right?
That's exactly right.
Then that's not wrong.
That's exactly right.
You really can't lose being a sedevacantist. You're always going to be right.
That's exactly right. And when they celebrate the Reformation Day, they put out stamps in honor of Luther. I mean,
yes, they did.
You got Benedict XVI. I don't know if they remember. He went into a Lutheran church several times, praising Martin Luther. He would bow towards their altar, and he would be praying against a woman bishop, right next to him. And again, it's not just Bergoglio. This goes back. This.
Oh, totally. Yes, it all fell apart after Pius XII died. It's really true. Of course, John the 23rd wasn't nearly as bad as what we see now, but he put it all in play. He got the ball rolling, right? He made Montini a cardinal. He called the council. I mean, he had just been elected or selected, whatever, right, in 1958, and a few weeks later, he's calling an ecumenical council. You can tell that was his agenda. That's what that was, and the first cardinal he nominated was Montini.
Mm.
Well,
and whatever else you do before you die, you got to call that council, right?
Well, and he was kicked out as a teacher. I forget when or where exactly, because of modernism.
Seminary teacher, yeah.
He was kicked out. They're saying, "Hey, you're too modern. You're not allowed to teach here anymore." Ended up becoming the supposed pope.
I think he was using a condemned book to teach church history or something.
I think it was Steiner, wasn't it? I think Introibo and I talked about this. It was Rudolf Steiner who talked about this crazy naturalism and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And he was on that list. He was on the official list as a suspicion of modernism. I think he took himself off when he got elected. So
you would. Yeah. Well, speaking of occultism, I'd love, Steven, if you could actually stay with us. I'm going to put you on hold. We're going to watch an interview we did with Introibo at Altare Dei about the occultism of Bergoglio. I think it segues really nicely into that conversation. We're going to play that video. It's something that we pre-recorded because he likes to remain anonymous. So we're going to run that video. Steven, I'm going to put you on hold. If you can stick with us, maybe you can comment when we come back. I'm going to try to contact Father Oswald as we go to break here, or as we go to this next video. I definitely still hope that he comes on. I think he plans to. Probably priestly duties that got in the way for the moment. But we will be back. Steve, we hope you'll join us as well. Here is a 15-minute segment with Introibo ad Altare Dei, if I can find it over here. Here we go. We're back with a very good friend to the show, our good buddy Introibo. He has chosen to remain anonymous and to have his voice changed for personal reasons, which we, of course, respect. And so we have done this show a few days before this live stream and recorded it with Introibo. I know people are thinking, okay, that may be a little strange for a live stream, but I can tell you it's definitely worth it for the material. Introibo has been joining us for the last few months now to really delve into the topic of occultism, and he has shined a lot of light on the topic. It's dark, it's ugly, but it's really a worthwhile thing to go check out. You can find a series of that. I think we've got 4 or 5 videos now on this channel, And you can definitely go over to his blog, his site at Introibo adultareday2.blogspot.com. He publishes weekly on Mondays. It's always fantastic content. And anyway, before I use up all of his time, Introibo, what do you have to say about Jorge Bergoglio and occultism?
Well, Jorge has been dabbling with dark forces in real life. According to NBC News, this is a quote: "He, that is Bergoglio, believes in alternate medicine." Now, papal biographer Austin Ivory says that in 2004, the so-called Pope, then Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio, began treatment with a Taoist monk named Lu Ming, and that's spelled Liuming, first and last name. Regular sessions of massage and acupuncture help Bergoglio conquer symptoms of diabetes and gallbladder problems. That was published in September 20th of 2015. That really sent up a flag for me, and I delved more into it. Disturbingly, Lu Ming is a Reiki practitioner, and the fact that Francis believes in and uses Reiki exposes his connection to pagan demonic forces and teachings. I'm going to explain exactly what that is. Now, Reiki comes to us from the Japanese words ki, K-I, which is alleged to be a universal life energy force that supposedly everything possesses. Again, this is going back to the pantheistic worldview of the occult. And Rei, R-E-I, means higher power. So it's the force of a higher power. That's what the word literally translated means. Reiki claims that everything in the universe is made up of this higher power, life force energy, even humans. Think of Star Wars and the blasphemous, "May the force be with you," instead of "May the Lord be with you." Okay, so it's like Star Wars in real life. So when someone is feeling depressed, sick in any way, it's an indication that their energy, so-called their energy force, is out of balance. And therefore, whatever that means, I don't know. Therefore, it is the function of the Reiki practitioner to channel the positive energy into the person, bringing them back to balance and wholeness. And this will allegedly cure whatever ails them, their gallbladder, their diabetes, their fill in the blank. All right. The founder of this practice is usually considered to be a Buddhist monk, Mikao Usi, who claims that he developed mystical power on a pagan retreat. So he went on a pagan retreat, and the spirit world again gave him these mystical powers. Reiki energy entered his crown chakra. Now, chakras are areas of the body that exude energy, and the crown chakra refers to the head, and enabled him to heal people. Now, if you go to Reiki.org, that's like one of the official Reiki's websites that explains what Reiki is. It says, quote, "Reiki is a Japanese technique for stress reduction and relaxation that also promotes healing. It is administered by laying on of hands and is based on the idea that an unseen life force energy flows through us and is what causes us to be alive. If one's life force energy is low, then we are more likely to get sick or feel stress. And if it is high, we are more capable of being happy and healthy individuals." Unquote. Now, here comes some pagan mumbo jumbo. The source or cause of health comes from the ki that flows through and around the individual rather than from the functional condition of the physical organs and tissues. So you might as well throw conventional medicine out the window. It is ki that animates the physical organs and tissues as it flows through them, and therefore is responsible for creating a healthy condition. If the flow of ki is disrupted, the physical organs and tissues will be adversely affected. Therefore, it is a disruption in the flow of ki that is the main cause of all illness. An important attribute of ki is that it responds to one's thoughts and feelings. How they know this, I don't know. Ki will flow more strongly or be weakened in its action depending on the quality of one's thoughts and feelings. It is our negative thoughts and negative feelings that are the main cause of restriction in the flow of ki. All negative or disharmonious thoughts or feelings will cause a disruption in the flow of ki. Listen to this part. Even Western medicine recognizes the role played by the mind in creating illnesses, and some Western doctors state that as much as 98% of illness is caused directly or indirectly by the mind. It must be understood that the mind exists not only in the brain, but also throughout the body. The nervous system extends to every organ and tissue in the body so that the mind exists there also. It is also known that the mind extends outside the body in a subtle energy field 2 to 3 feet thick, called the aura. Because of this, it is more appropriate to call our mind a mind-body, as the mind and body are so closely linked, unquote. You can look that up on Reiki.org. Now, here's what's wrong with what was just said. Number one, there's no soul but an animating principle, as the animating principle of the body, but some impersonal key force energy. Second, ki nevertheless responds and can be manipulated by thoughts and feelings, yet there's no explanation as to how or why this is known and proven. The claim that, quote, some Western doctors, not even naming one, state 98% of illnesses caused directly or indirectly by the mind is not only completely unsubstantiated, but terms are not even defined. What exactly does it mean that an illness is caused indirectly by the mind? Your guess is as good as mine, Kevin.
Right.
It states that the existence of some aura, which is known to exist, going 2 to 3 feet outside the body without a single citation to any relevant medical or scientific source whatsoever. So you have to buy into all of this basically on faith. And I'm not talking about the capital F faith of Christianity. Lu Ming is now 55 years old, a Taoist monk. Taoism, spelled with a T, but it's pronounced like a D. Taoism is another pagan religion, and their beliefs are: Taoism is loosely based on the writings of a mythical figure named Lao Tzu, who lived some 2,500 years ago, and calls for an adherence to the way. That's what the Tao is, the way, which practitioners have long interpreted as a return back to the natural world. The core of the basic belief and doctrine of Taoism is that the Tao is the origin and law of all things in the universe. Taoists believe that people can become deities or live forever through practicing certain rituals or austerities. You can actually cheat death.
Has that worked yet?
I don't know of any. Although, believe it or not, you're going to see that Ming claims that Bergoglio will live to be at least 140. That's what he said. Taoists stress the importance of harmonizing with nature by balancing yin and yang. Again, this yin-yang is, again, pagan religion, right? And developing ki through meditation and disengagement. The human body is regarded as a source of ki-derived energy, which some people have the power to concentrate and congeal into an essence. I don't know what that means either. He also is variously known as the breath of heaven, the mystical breath, the breath of nature, and the quality of spirit. That is what Taoism teaches. When Bergoglio was suffering from his various health problems, diabetes, gallbladder, etc., he turned to a pagan healer, not to modern medicine, not to his faith, but to a pagan healer and his Reiki energy force healing. In the October 2013 issue of a Spanish-language Argentinian magazine called, what else, Tao, T-A-O, ran a story on the association between Bergoglio and Ming. We learned some additional facts about Ming and Bergoglio, and here they are. Ming practices divination, which is the art or practice that seeks to foresee or foretell the future events or discover hidden knowledge, usually by the interpretation of omens or by the aid of supernatural powers, and is forbidden, both by church teaching and in the Bible. He claims Bergoglio will live to be at least 140 years old. He told Bergoglio there is no difference between the Tao and the God of Catholicism. And he manipulated Bergoglio's life force. He actually participated in a pagan ritual. As a result of Ming's so-called treatments, Bergoglio claimed he was cured, no longer takes medication, and continues to practice what Ming told him, continues to practice it. That was a quote. The then cardinal from Argentina gave Ming a Spanish copy of the I Ching, which, for those of you who don't know, that's a pagan book also known as the Book of Changes, which is an ancient Chinese divination text. And he's not giving him a copy of the Bible or a copy of why Catholicism is true or anything like that. He's giving him paganism. He's giving him a gift, telling him to stay in paganism because he gets something, he derives something out of it. And here, to show that the aphorism that the broken clock is right twice every 24 hours, right, is true, get this. The Vatican II sect so-called bishops in the United States condemned the practice of Reiki in 2009, 4 years before Bergoglio became the alleged pope. And the document is entitled, and I quote, Guidelines for Evaluating Reiki as an Alternative Therapy, and you can look that up online, has this to say in paragraph number 9. The difference between what Christians recognize as healing by divine grace and Reiki therapy is also evident in the basic terms used by Reiki proponents to describe what happens in Reiki therapy, particularly that of universal life energy. Neither the scriptures nor the Christian tradition as a whole speak of the natural world based on universal life energy that is subject to manipulation by natural human power of thought and will. In fact, this worldview has as its origins in Eastern religions and has a certain monist and pantheistic character in that distinctions among self, world, and God tend to fall away. Now, remember, we're talking about Vatican II sect bishops here. We're not talking about, traditionalists. Their conclusion, Reiki therapy finds no support in the findings of natural science or in Christian belief. For a Catholic to believe in Reiki therapy presents insoluble problems. In terms of caring for one's spiritual health, there are important dangers. To use Reiki, one would have to accept, at least in implicit way, central elements of the worldview that undergirds Reiki theory, elements that belong neither to Christian faith nor to natural science. Without justification from Christian faith or natural science, however, a Catholic who puts his or her trust in Reiki would be operating in the realm of superstition, the no man's land that is neither faith nor science. Superstition corrupts one's worship of God by turning one's religious feeling and practice in a false direction, unquote. Now, coming from modernists, this is pretty damning, all right? Now, we know about ex cum apostolatus officio, that somebody cannot attain to the papacy if they are a heretic. Well, this clearly shows that he is participating in paganism. He is a pagan ritual practitioner who believes in occult forces that permeate the universe. He believes in pantheism. And while Bergoglio was cardinal, he engaged in these practices as denounced by his own Vatican II sect episcopate in the USA. According even to them, Bergoglio would be operating in the realm of superstition and accept, at least in implicit way, central elements of the worldview that undergirds Reiki theory, elements that belong neither to Christian faith nor to natural science. And yet Bergoglio credits a pagan life force channeling person, Reiki, with giving him health and continues to use it and promote it. According to theologian Mackenzie, quote, the very commission of any act which signifies heresy, for example, the statement of some doctrine contrary or contradictory to a revealed or defined dogma, gives sufficient grounds for judicial presumption of heretical depravity, unquote. That's from page 35 is delict of heresy. Now, what is it that he is contradicting? How about in the Vatican Council of 1870, infallible canon number 3, if anyone say that the substance and essence of God and all things is one and the same, let him be anathema, the condemnation of pantheism upon which his Reiki is predicated. All right. So can Bergoglio be ignorant of this truth? Again, according to Mackenzie, quote, if the delinquent making this claim of ignorance be a cleric, his plea for mitigation must be dismissed either as untrue or at least crass and supine. His ecclesiastical training in the seminary will ensure that the church's attitude towards heresy was imparted to him on page 48. So I'll let everyone draw their own logical conclusion. Could Jorge Bergoglio have even attained the papacy given his involvement with the pagan practices that calls upon forces which contradict the teachings of the church on the nature of God? Reiki was condemned even by his own sex bishops' conference in the U.S. This is yet another nail on the coffin of those who want to recognize and resist Francis or somehow perform mental gymnastics that he's the Pope. Our Lord said in Matthew chapter 7, verse 17, even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, and every evil tree bringeth forth evil fruit. The fruits of Reiki are to entrap one in pagan beliefs and practices. It shouldn't be any wonder that Bergoglio can say with a straight face, I believe in a God, not a Catholic God. There is no Catholic God.
Well, there he is, the man, the myth, the legend. That is very well said. And this is exactly why you have to go check out the rest of our series on occultism and go check out his blog. He produces this type of material weekly. Go check it out. Go subscribe. And well, I'm sitting here kind of stunned. I don't know where we're going to go from this, but thank you so much, Introibo. And until next time, hopefully until our next podcast on occultism, God bless.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
All right. So, oh, no, we're not back. Just a sec. Oh. This is why I need a producer, guys. I need a producer and a secretary. No, I mean,
with
pretty
a very
good friend to the show, our good buddy Introibo. He has chosen to remain.
On March 13th, 2013, 10 years ago today, white smoke and the bells of St. Peter's filled Rome.
Sorry, guys.
I thought we'd seen that before.
I have a delay with my computer. Yeah, I know. I liked it so much I wanted to play it again. Apologies for that, everybody. That was not meant to be that way. Anyway, thanks to Introibo again. That was a very fascinating segment, I thought, and I think that it's. I guess I'll just ask you guys. Maybe Mario, I'll ask you first. Do you have any comments on it? Is that something you'd heard before? The pagan practices of Bergoglio?
Yes, I had heard that, and in fact, some years ago, in one of his famous airplane interviews, he was asked, how do you stay fit, right, in your age? Something like that, and he said, I don't go to the doctor, I go to the witch. You can't make it up.
Right, I remember that.
And yes, we do have the documentation. We'll provide it gladly. But yes, that he did actually say that. And now, of course, it all makes sense, right? Also, the fact that his favorite exorcist is a Lutheran, and I mean, Lutherans are not even validly ordained clergy. It shows just Jorge Bergoglio is simply not a Catholic. Okay, that explains everything, right? And as a non-Catholic, he's of course also not the Pope of the Catholic Church. How can you be the head of something of which you're not even a member? So, like I said, it's really not that difficult to figure this out, and it just leads to all kinds of questions and issues and so forth, but certainly it is no solution to say that Jorge Bergoglio is the Pope of the Catholic Church. I know some people will kind of, say, well, but we need a Pope. Well, yes, we do need a Pope, but the thing is that if Jorge Bergoglio is a valid Pope, actually then we don't need a Pope, because he's certainly not doing anything for the salvation of souls. If somebody like Jorge Bergoglio could be the Pope, then the papacy would be very dangerous, right? Because it would constantly tell you to follow the Pope, and yet at the same time actually be leading you to damnation. And that's obviously not the office that our Lord instituted. So I think, at the end of the day, we always have to keep in mind the Catholic Church is the ark of salvation. Right? And the Pope is the rock upon which that church was built. And he, by the promises of Christ, by the institution of Christ, he is the one bishop who can never defect. Like the true faith will always be found in the apostolic see. And that is why it is so important to understand that Jorge Bergoglio is not the Pope. If he were, we said of Acontis, a lot of people think that, we believe the church has defected. No, we believe that the church cannot defect, and therefore it is, since Jorge Bergoglio has obviously defected, he cannot possibly be the Pope. And I remember some years back, somebody at the Remnant made the, I guess they were kind of looking maybe for, for a compromise, for just to be nice and kind of, give us an olive branch or something. And they started saying, well, it just doesn't matter if Jorge Bergoglio is the Pope or not. And I thought to myself, if there's one thing worse than saying that Francis is the Pope, it's saying that it doesn't matter if he's the Pope. Like, that is even worse. And, nobody who looks at what the Catholic Church teaches about the papacy could say it doesn't matter if Francis is the Pope. And, you know, why can they say something like that? Because they do not believe in the papacy, I'm afraid. And whether that be out of ignorance or negligence or because they've lost the faith, that's a different story. But they ultimately do not believe those things. And that's a very, very scary thing, because you cannot defend the Catholic faith. You cannot keep the faith. You cannot restore the faith if you don't have the faith, right? So it's the semi-trads, I call them, right? The recognize and resist traditionalists. They want to defend the faith by contradicting the faith, by denying the faith, and that's just like trying to borrow your way out of debt. It's not going to work, you know. And I say that in charity. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck. I'm not trying to, you know. I understand it's difficult to work through these things, but ultimately, you're not going to get around the fact that Jorge Bergoglio is not the Pope of the Catholic Church. Period.
Well, I think it's important to remember too that as State of Acontis, we really, really value and treasure and respect the papacy, right? I mean, I think that's a point that a lot of people miss. Again, they think, okay, you just don't have to listen. You're just you don't really care. It's like, no, it's exactly the opposite. Say what you want about State of Acontis. We greatly value the papacy so much that we say, well, these men, the last, what is it, 6 or 7 now, they just couldn't be Pope because that's impossible. And I think that's important to remember. And I think, as you said, you know, it's easy to get that confused because people think, well, you just don't listen to the Pope. Well, yeah, because he can't be the Pope.
Yes, exactly.
Let me add this also, because there's going to be people watching. They're going to think, you know, we're not saying that a Pope can't be a bad Pope. We believe, because they like to say, well, they're just bad popes. We're not saying, we understand that popes can be bad popes. We've had bad popes. There's no question about it. And we've had popes that have erred, but not against the faith. You know, when the First Vatican Council defined papal infallibility, they went through the history of the church and they came up and found 40 papal errors. But see, these errors were not against the faith as it's been defined. You know, I give you an example that always pops right into my head. It was Pope Saint Leo IX believed that Simoniacs, their orders were invalid. Saint Peter Damian said he corrected them and said no, they are valid, and the church finally said yes, they're valid. So there's a case in point where you have a pope who's a saint who was wrong about something. So popes can be wrong. We're not saying that. But what they can't be is heretical, and they can't teach things that go against the faith in their documents. If the church hasn't settled something yet and it's still in the opinion stage, yeah, popes can err in the opinion stage, because what is an opinion? It's an opinion. It's not a teaching of the church. So we want to make that distinction so people don't go, you know, crazy thinking we're saying that popes never err. But they don't err against the faith, but they can err, and they're not perfect, and they can be bad. But they had to be Catholic. That's the whole. Even in the past, anti-popes. We've had lots of anti-popes, by the way. We've had.
Oh, did we lose them?
65 of them, but they were Catholic. They were still Catholic in faith for the most part. So they're not like these the Vatican II popes. They're anti-Catholic. It's not that they're just not Catholic. They're anti-Catholic. They are leading people to hell. They are teaching heresy, and they're promoting the LGBTQ lifestyle and culture, for instance. That's just one example. Yeah. But they're creating an entire culture in the faith that everybody goes to heaven. Purgatory almost doesn't exist. Hell's only reserved for the really, really bad people. But everybody goes to heaven, and it doesn't really matter what religion you are, and we should love everybody and tolerate everybody and their lifestyles. And that's the mentality of the Novus Ordo Catholics today. And I put up a poll here recently, which showed the different countries, how many Catholics, these would be Novus Ordo, that believe that, say, homosexual marriage is okay. And the United States had 61%. Mm-hmm. So that just give you an example of, and that's just of that doctrine. If you ask them how many of them believe in transubstantiation, you'll find that it's even higher. I think it's more like 70 or 80%. I know it was 66% like 20 years ago. It's probably worse now. But they create this. What they've done is they've allowed the church to go so far to the left. It's become cultural. So it's part of the world today. And you can't distinguish a Catholic from, when I say Catholic, a Novus Ordo, you can't distinguish them from anybody else in the world because they're all the same. They all believe the same. What's the point? Why be a Catholic? So that's why we're Sedevacantist. We're Catholics first, right? We're Catholics who hold to a Sedevacant position. The Pope is, there is no Pope. But we are the real Catholics, and we're trying to uphold the faith, and we're saying what's right and what's wrong and doing our duty as Catholics.
And we believe in the papacy.
And we believe in the absolute. That's why we're Sedevacantists, right?
Exactly.
Because we believe in the papacy. It's because we cherish what the dogma, and we have a listen. If you think Bergoglio is the Pope, you have a very low regard for Christ, I would think, because what Lord would put someone like that in the head of his church? I mean, wolves aren't shepherds, and the scriptures are very clear to beware of wolves. Beware of them. And if you read the commentaries, they're talking about heretical bishops. All the commentaries say that's what the wolves are. The wolves in sheep's clothing are heretical bishops. They can't be they can't be actual holding positions in the church because wolves aren't shepherds. It's a very simple concept.
Yeah, you know what? Let me say something, if I could, real quick, regarding an argument made by Peter. I think it was Peter Kwasniewski, and he was saying something along the lines of, "Well, in the last 60 years, we've learned that the Catholic, basically, what the popes said in their encyclicals or allocutions or whatever about the papacy." After Vatican I, that this is just like, exaggerates hyperpapalism, right? It's exaggerated. Kwasniewski even said that some of what St. Pius X even said in speeches regarding the papacy is a historical embarrassment. Okay, this is how the man talks about a canonized saint pope. And so the argument he was making is that, God is allowing us to see that those things were excesses, okay? That these teachings, what the Pope said about, faithful adherence to basically whatever the Pope says, more or less, I'm exaggerating a little, that has now been corrected, so to speak, by God allowing somebody like Francis to make clear to us that that's incorrect teaching. And not only is that outrageous, I would say it is actually the other way around. It is, we need to understand that God gave us those teachings of the popes, especially since Vatican I, but not only, precisely so that we could know that Jorge Bergoglio and his 5 predecessors of unhappy memory are not valid popes. So I would turn it around on Kwasniewski and say, instead of saying Francis is the proof that Pius X was wrong, I would say, no, Pius X is the proof that Francis is not the Pope. I mean, an argument like that from history can work both ways, and Kwasniewski uses it to contradict Catholic teaching, and we use it, or we can use it, to contradict false papal claimants. See, this is the scary part. People would sooner abandon belief in the papacy than abandon belief that Jorge Bergoglio is the Pope.
And they've done that.
That's insane. That's totally insane. Whether Bergoglio is the Pope or not is a historical circumstance, but the papacy is Catholic teaching. You can be wrong about a historical circumstance, but you cannot deny the Catholic teaching.
And
I find this very troubling. This is the new papacy they're coming up with. The great rethink is what our friends at WM Review called it, I think.
Well, they keep canonizing each other too. So I think being a Vatican II Pope is an automatic. I'm going to be a saint someday. And what are they doing? They're canonizing Vatican II. They're canonizing the new religion. That's what they're doing. They're canonizing all the things that they've put forth. And
for sure, yes. And you can tell.
canonizations are not just saying that someone's in heaven. Now, that's the argument that these pseudo-treds try to, well, they're just in heaven. That's not what canonization is. You're saying these people lived exemplary lives. They're people that we can follow and imitate. That's why you raise them to the altar, because these are men you can look to and say, I can be like him. It doesn't say that. And so we're going to say that John Paul II is a saint. Paul VI is a saint, and they got him raised to the highest position.
Right. And now some people will make the argument, right, that, but what about St. Mary Magdalene? What about St. Dismas, right, the good thief? Well, those were supposed to imitate in their penitence, right, in their repentance, in the case of St. Dismas, in their last-minute conversion.
Exactly.
Nobody. It's not like the Vatican II Church canonized John Paul II because of his heroic conversion on his deathbed that nobody knows about, right? They canonized him for all the bad stuff, essentially.
There's a little tradition that Mary Magdalene never sinned again after our Lord said, "Never sin again." I know you don't have to believe it, but it is a little belief that, a tradition that she may have never sinned after that. Mm-hmm, I've heard John the Baptist, same thing with John the Baptist. When he leaped in his mother's womb, he never sinned. I mean, but yeah, we are martyrs that changed at their death. We're not saying you can imitate their lives before they're saints because they gave up their lives at the last moment. But
well, and I tell you, an interesting, I don't know if you want to call it a rabbit hole, but it came from one of the books from the Verrecchio fathers, Tumultuous Times, I think. And it talked about the communism of JP2. And that is fascinating. That's a deep dive into how he survived in communist Poland and thrived, and what was really buddy with communist leadership. And it goes pretty deep into it, but a really fascinating read. Of course, anything by the Verrecchio fathers is highly recommendable. But yeah, it's as we see. I mean, with most of this stuff, it's not just Bergoglio. I mean, it really does go back all the way back to the 1960s, and JP2 was a prime example of it, and we just see the fruits of it more and more today, I suppose.
Yes,
I think when I think of Vatican, it goes back to Vatican II. When we think of all the specific errors of Vatican II, I think of the one where it's talking about non-Catholics, how they're members of Christ's body and have a right to be called Christian. If that statement is true, then you don't have a right to call them heretics or schismatics, because they have a right to be called Christian. Yeah. And that's what Vatican II is teaching there. And Bergoglio is just following Vatican II. He's doing a nice job of it. And Mario, you even got an article, I'll never forget it, where he's admitted, Francis is admitted as leading a Lutheran service when they didn't have their priest.
Yes, he has said that as well. He said that he
church too.
He jumped in, right? When the Lutheran pastor couldn't make it, that he led a Lutheran prayer service. Now, it was not a Lutheran communion service, but it still doesn't matter. You can lead a Lutheran prayer service.
And he preached in a Presbyterian church.
Well, that's his religion, right? I mean, anything but Catholicism. And you know what? I'd like to say something about proselytism, if I could, right? That's one of his big boogeymen, I guess. Proselytism, Francis is always condemning proselytism. And in the beginning, of course, all the smart Novus Ordo apologists were telling us, well, you have to understand that when Francis says proselytism, he doesn't mean converting people. He means trying to convert people using dishonest means, strong-arming them, manipulating them. And I'm thinking, oh, really? So where are all those hordes of Novus Ordo people dishonestly trying to convert others? Because, I mean, considering how frequently Francis condemns proselytism, you'd think there is just, it's a real epidemic, right? And of course, nobody does that. It's a cop-out, okay? Bergoglio obviously means converting money. He's clarified that even since. He told a Lutheran girl Her name was Henrietta, right? Henrietta. He did that in the Vatican audience hall. We got the documentation on that. She wanted to know, and this was, of course, this was regarding like, I think 500 years of Lutheranism or whatever, and they had an ecumenical audience with Novus Ordos and Lutherans together. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I don't think the girl herself was a Lutheran. I think she may have been Novus Ordo. Doesn't matter, the one or the other. And Bergoglio said to her, "It is not right to convince others of your faith." And that is the verbatim quote. And that's exactly what he means. That's exactly how he acts. He doesn't mind if somebody converts, I guess, but to what religion, right? To like the Novus Ordo religion, but never by means of argumentation, by convincing people, never by the traditional apologetics. And that's typical for modernists because they reject all that. They need you to have an experience. It's amazing when you read Francis's stuff, which I have to do constantly, the excessive emphasis on experience, on the subjective, it is really, it really stands out. It is very apparent how much subjectivism there is in everything, right? And so, so his constant attacks on proselytism, also that goes hand in hand with his ideas about, I mean, the man is an apostate. He doesn't believe in Catholicism. He believes God wills a diversity of religions. So sure, what's proselytism do, right? It just creates friction among people. It's not good for his fraternity doctrine. But let's just be honest about it. He does not want people to convert to Catholicism. And he tells people that. There are a number of Protestants who've met with Francis who later said, he told us he's not interested in converting us. Totally. That is, after everything we know about Bergoglio, yeah, that fits.
Well, I think he's forbidden specifically with the Jews, right? Don't go out and try to convert the Jews.
Yeah, that's a whole separate chapter, right? Bergoglio believes the Old Covenant is still valid for the Jews.
Yeah.
He said that. He said that even before his election, right? In that book, On Heaven and Earth, that he co-authored with the Rabbi Abraham Skorka.
That's right. Well, there's pictures of him. He's lighting the candles, right, at the menorahs, and he participates. They all the Vatican II popes have participated in other religions. So you see Bergoglio. I remember John Paul II doing it probably the most, but there you go.
Well, you can research these pictures easily. I mean, just look up Assisi. What is it? 1981,
86, and 2002.
93
right
as well.
2011.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Benedict has some big pictures. It's easy to find. This is very public material, and I think it's one of those crazy things that I've heard the arguments back in the time of JP2, maybe for the 86 time. People, they'd say, well, we didn't really know because we didn't have the information available. Mm-hmm. We didn't have the pictures. No one told us. Yeah. And it's like, okay, fair enough, I guess. I mean, I could see that. But now it's like, guys, go look on the internet. It is literally everywhere. You can find it anywhere you look. Just Google it, and you'll find 800 pictures of apostasy.
Well, I'll tell you, who does a great job is Tradition in Action. They have a whole section called Revolution in Pictures. They update that all the time. I haven't been there in a while, but I did check it here a few days ago.
Although I just want to make clear, we do object to their theology.
Absolutely. So they're not sedevacantist. So, and I've got open letters to them. You can read them on my blog. Mm-hmm. But they do a good job on they show the Revolution in Pictures is it's unbelievable. And unless you see it, you wouldn't believe it. So
yeah. I'd like to also give a quick shout out to Jimmy Aiken, the tireless Novus Ordo apologist who for the longest time was always telling everybody why what Francis said wasn't heresy and why it wasn't a scandal and why Remember this? It was something like, the headline was always something like, "Did Pope Francis really XYZ?" And then it was like 8 things to know and share. That also stopped after a few years. It was just not sustainable, I guess. And I was just always amused that it's like, oh, how to understand why, Francis didn't speak heresy in 11 easy steps. It's like, come on, guys. I mean,
listen, I've written all of those letters.
But it's such a good point because it really comes down to, and we all see this, is that it comes down to people, Catholics, Novus Ordo Catholics, are listening to men on podcasts trying to filter through what the Pope is saying.
Yeah.
And these guys on podcasts are telling them what they should and shouldn't follow from the Pope.
Yes.
That happens every day.
Yes.
That's just sit here for just 1 second and just think about that. Guys on podcasts are filtering what the Pope, what you should and shouldn't listen to from the Pope. It's absolute insanity.
Acting as the Pope's Pope. I got an article.
Yeah.
Acting as the Pope's Pope.
Yes, I always like to call them papal babysitters. Right?
I like Christopher Farrar, where it's only the magisterium when it teaches the truth, but when it doesn't teach the truth, that's not the magisterium.
Yes, that's. I mean, it's insane. Well, and then in the same breath, he'll say, "Well, the magisterium isn't always infallible." He just contradicted that. Mm-hmm. If you're saying that if it's not true, it's not magisterial, you're saying then everything in the magisterium is infallible by definition. The problem is, I think, with a lot of these recognize and resist apologists is they don't think it through, right? They never think critically about these things. Like, hello, do you hear what you're saying? And so, anyway, you know what? Maybe we could spend a few minutes on the Society of St. Pius X, because you would think that as these sort of self-appointed, ultimate guardians of tradition and orthodoxy, you'd think they have a lot to complain about in the last 10 years. And I mean, you tell me if you know otherwise, but where is the SSPX? It's never been worse than now. And I mean, all you ever see is maybe once a year there's a conference somewhere, and then they have this news site where they, yeah, sure, they're critical and stuff, but I mean, Bergoglio has basically exploded. He has demolished Catholicism at its root, and the SSPX is like, he says we're Catholic.
I know an SSX priest that's actually a Sedevacanist. So he doesn't make himself known as a Sedevacanist, but he is a Sedevacanist, but he operates in the SSPX. So they do have them. They're in their organization.
Oh, no, I'm sure they do. But I mean, like, why is the SSPX not making a big fuss about Francis? Where are the press conferences? Where are the protests? Why are they not in St. Peter's Square?
They got their Latin Mass. They got their Latin Mass, and they're happy.
Yeah. Well, they got their. Oh, remember, they got their jurisdiction, their faculties for confession and marriages, which they thought they didn't need anyway. And have you noticed how lenient Bergoglio has been with the SSPX? Why he's like, really cracking down on anyone like suspected of Lefebvreism under his control, right? And he's clobbering the traditional mass as much as he can. He's constantly preaching against traditionalism, against rigidity, against nostalgia, against clinging to the past. But with the SSPX, he's extremely nice. He's bent over backwards to be kind to them. You tell me why you think that is, but my theory is that he has to woo them because he doesn't have control over them. So, of course, he's going to be nice to them because he doesn't have the upper hand, right? He doesn't control them. They're simply going to do their own thing if they don't like what he says. So I think that's the reason.
The SSPX also went through that scandal as well. So they had their little scandal with their priests. So I think that hurt them. I think a lot of people, I know a particular family that left them because of the scandal. So they're probably hurting a little bit. And when something like that happens, you kind of.
But I mean, why is he extending like all these favors to the SSPX when he is very, very harsh on all like the diocesan traditionalists and so on? Right? Why that disconnect? And I just think it's because he doesn't have the SSPX yet. They're not under him. If they ever were to join and be obedient to him, he would treat them just as badly as all the others, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure. I mean, he's clever, right? He's a politician. He knows how to get what he wants.
He's a Jesuit. He's no dummy. These guys have been trained, and they've been to school for many years. They're not stupid.
Yeah, it's just not Catholicism that they're trained in anymore.
Right.
Now, there's still so many things. Go ahead.
I would ask you guys. I mean, I think this is something I've really found recently. I mean, interviewing different people. I had a great interview with Father Thomas Oyeka from Nigeria the other day, and fantastic. Anyone, please go check that out on the YouTube channel. I'll try to remember to add a link in this video. And Father spent 9 years in a religious order in the Novus Ordo in Nigeria. And it's a really fascinating story of how, kind of step by step, he slowly found his way to truth. And I mean, he found it because he was looking for it. And it took a long time. And I think that's something to really remember, I suppose, is that the most important thing is the search for truth, right? To actually really want it. And I had a young man from France the other day I talked to, I think early 20s, and he just converted or became a traditional Catholic. And I asked him, why you're so young, how did that happen? He said, yeah, I just decided I'd go back and read the documents of the church. So he went back and read the encyclicals and read the actual teachings of the church, and he found the truth. And I guess I'd ask you guys, I mean, maybe Steve, I'll ask you first this time. I mean, what is it, what people who are watching this who want the truth, what should they do?
First of all, you got to be a prayerful individual. So you should be praying. You got to want the truth, and you got to open your mind to the possibility. I think I've told you this before. If you're not willing to consider what we're saying is true, you will not accept it. It doesn't matter how many facts we throw out there. It doesn't matter what they've done. Ordained women, canonized Martin Luther. It doesn't matter. You're not going to become a saint. You're not going to hold that position. We're Catholics. I want to emphasize that we are Catholics. But you're not going to be part of us unless you consider that we're right. You have to first consider that we might be right. So that's the first. You got to be prayerful, and you got to open your mind and your heart, and maybe consider the possibility.
Yeah, I would even say, like, you can even just forget about anything you think you know about Sedevacantism or Sedevacantists, and just read the papal teachings from before Vatican II. Immerse yourself in the religion, in Catholicism from before Vatican II, and you're going to figure out very quickly that what they present now in the Vatican is not Catholicism. And again, read the teaching on the papacy, the Catholic teaching on the papacy. There's no way you can fit Jorge Bergoglio into that.
And so I'll ask you that. Well, literally, what should they read? And because I think this is a really good point, because I think we're talking about all this stuff, and you're saying the document, like Mario, give us some actual what should they read? What should they buy? A certain book? Should they read a certain encyclical? What do you recommend? Because I think that's really important.
Yeah, so you could, you can go to papalencyclicals.net. I think you can get basically all of the papal encyclicals in English. They started in 1740. That was the first papal encyclical of Pope Benedict XIV. And, go through 1958. You can ignore the rest, of course. Of course, we can recommend a few, like Mortalium Animos of Pope Pius XI, right? Absolute must read. Satis Cognitum of Pope Leo XIII.
My favorite.
Mystici Corporis of Pope Pius XII. And I mean, there are so many. Pius IX has so many encyclicals, and if you want books, let me see. So you can, for example,
the Roman Catechism.
The Roman exactly. Although that doesn't have a whole lot on the papacy.
Right.
Right. But well, I can give you some book recommendations later that we can link. But yeah, pre-Vatican II theology manuals, like The Church of Christ by Father Sylvester Berry, right? Or the Monsignor Gerard Van Noort's book, his dogmatic theology series, Christ's Church, is the one that has the ecclesiology in it. Denzinger, of course, right? 1954 edition. It was the last pre-Vatican II edition.
Ott's Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma.
Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma, right, by Ludwig Ott. Although that's very compact. But I mean, also there's a number. If you go to novusordowatch.org and you go in the menu option, you click on Catholicism, and then I think the menu option is the Catholic papacy. I mean, we have tons and tons of quotes that are taken straight from the magisterial documents. Yeah, if you read all that, you're going to see that this is not the religion they teach you in your local Novus Ordo parish.
Also, read our stuff, because we have people who are attacking sedevacantism with arguments. We've answered all these arguments. If you have to do some research, and if you go to my website, go to Mario's website, you can find the answers. We've answered much of the stuff, like the universal acceptance. And that's one of those things they keep bringing up. I've done several articles on the universal acceptance doctrine. We have an answer for that.
Okay, the idea that the whole church cannot accept the false pope is that what we're talking about.
Right. But I got 3 theologians and 2 canonists that say opposite. So, and these
well, I always like to tell people that if you want to make that argument, well, but then you have to follow through with the logic. It's not just that, well, he has to be the Pope because everybody accepts him. Okay, but then everything that the church teaches about the papacy must then apply to him. And then, so in other words, you can't have it both ways. You can't say he's good enough to be Pope because we have to have a Pope, but he's not good enough. He's not Pope enough to be followed. That doesn't make any sense. It's either Bergoglio all the way or not Bergoglio. There is no in between, right? But because just having a Pope, the church doesn't have a Pope for the sake of having a Pope, right? Christ didn't institute the papacy just for its own sake, just because it's kind of nice to have. But because the Pope will guarantee the faith and the good government of the church and the sanctification of souls, right? And before I forget, I want to just show this. This is what I'm about to show you is the cover of an Italian book by Nello Scavo and Roberto Beretta. And I like the book simply for its title. Okay. Fake Pope. It's hilarious. Now, no, it's not a sedevacantist book. This book is actually, it's about 260 pages of them supposedly exposing fake news about Francis. Okay. Still, doesn't matter. I just like the title. Okay. I think it's great. Fake Pope with him on the cover. Awesome. Priceless. So I wanted to make sure I get that in there. And then, Kevin, how's it looking for as far as other guests or anything else?
Well, we have coming up next. We have in hopefully about 5 minutes, we'll be able to play the video from Louis Verrecchio. Now, Mario and I did an interview with him earlier today, and we had some technical issues, which fortunately most of our show has been blessed not to have, but that recording did. So we had to do an edit of it, and that has been edited by the hero of the show, my dad, in the background. And it's being uploaded right now to YouTube, so we'll be able to play that here in the coming minutes. Okay. For priests, I'm still working on it. So maybe after we play the Louis Verrecchio interview, perhaps we're going to come back for a quick few minutes with a priest or two. But I'm still kind of working through my network trying to figure something out. But unfortunately, Father Oswald, I imagine again, I think he's a priest. Maybe got called away to a sick call.
Yes, and obviously the precedence. Yeah,
of course, and it's unfortunate. I know we all really wanted to hear from him and from Father Benedict, but as someone who does podcasts all the time with priests, you just learn to understand that again. Yeah,
and for those who don't,
duties come before.
Yeah, maybe for those who don't know Father Oswald, just tell us real quick what his claim to fame is.
Yeah, well, I'll let Steven do that since Father Oswald is Steve's priest. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, he used to be a Novus Ordo priest, and he's told us stories about being in the seminary. So he saw this stuff in the seminary, but you keep it in the back of your head is what he did, and he, and then when he finally clicks, just like it does to all of us, you hear it, and then all of a sudden you're able to wrap your mind around it, and that's what happened. He wrote his bishop. Hey, he went back to the seminary again. So there's a man dedicated who went to the seminary twice. He's a very sharp individual. And, he's one of those that he doesn't talk unless he's spoken to. And he's very reverent, and he's a wonderful priest. I have nothing negative whatsoever to say about him. I'm very blessed to have him as a priest. Mm-hmm. And I hope he continues to be our priest forever. So,
well, and I know he also said I had to plug Novus Ordo Watch here. I know he said that Novus Ordo Watch played a part into his conversion or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. I remember him saying that he would sneak out and read Novus Ordo Watch. I remember there must be an interview with, maybe it must be True Restoration that did it. It's fascinating, and I remember the part that always sticks out to me, if I remember correctly, was that when he was in the seminary, they discouraged the praying of the rosary. Now, maybe someone who's heard that can tell me. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was the interview with Father Michael Oswald. And I'm not 100%, but I think that was him. And it's just one of those things that's so shocking, but also kind of what you would expect, right? I mean, because,
the rosary is a danger to them, for sure.
Last month, he told us how he knew something was wrong when he was saying amen, and they were complaining about it. He should be saying amen instead of amen. He told us this last month, and I was like, crazy. Over little things like that. Why do you say amen? So
don't be so rigid. Come on. None of
rigid,
this,
right?
Latin stuff. Gee whiz,
Mm-hmm.
Come on. Vernacular, guys.
Oh my goodness.
No, it is. I hope maybe we can have him on. Maybe we can have on Father Oswald for another show. Anyone who is interested, who's enjoyed this live stream, please like, share, subscribe to the channel. We provide daily content. Maybe usually not stuff quite so theological or newsworthy as this, but I think always we try to do the best we can. Of course, go over to novusordowatch.org. Well, what else do I need to say about novusordowatch.org? I think everyone knows it. And of course, you get to Steven Spray's website at stevenspray.wordpress.com, where again, in Introibo as well, Introibo Altare 2.blogspot.com, just Catholic material. And I think it's something that I say all the time on the show, the importance of creating things to make new things, because I think that there were many years when Sedevacantists were kind of in the catacombs. Mm-hmm. Now, in a way, we still are, because of course we don't have a pope, so we are still, in a way, persecuted in a way. But I think it's so important to go and spread the good word, I suppose, and to spread how beautiful our faith is. And as Steve says, he has a great priest now, and I'm sure a growing parish, because when you get a good priest, a holy priest, you see the growth, and it builds on itself and becomes this beautiful thing that we know the Catholic faith to be. And I think that's also important to say after all this, I guess, negative talk about Bergoglio, which is of course 100% deserved and fitting. I think we are all, the three of us are so extremely blessed and lucky to have the true faith and to have the comfort of that, and to be able to live in true Catholicism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, before we move on to whatever's next, could you pull up that photo or that link regarding the absolutely insane crucifix that Bergoglio kissed at World Youth Day in 2013? Because I think this is one of those stories that I think didn't get a whole lot of attention, and it should have. This was back in the
Let's...
summer of 2013, Rio de Janeiro. Okay, this is not the best image because you can't really see the crucifix. Do you have another one?
Let me see.
If
you're testing my technical abilities here, Mario. That's right. Okay, you sent me the link.
Yeah, it was a. It looked occultist.
Yeah. Actually, good. This is a good practice for what I'm going to do next for Louis. I'm going to try to screen share. Okay, bear with me, everybody. Bear with me. We've gone for 2 hours. Now we're going to be sloppy, right? Because we've done 2 hours of good production value.
There's one picture that stands out in my mind as in tradition and action. It's got this picture. It's an older picture where Pope Francis, he's holding hands with an openly gay priest as they walk. They're walking around, and that image is just burnt into my head. Yikes. And when you see it, you're like, oh my goodness. So there's a reason why he's appointing people like John Stowe and what have you. Crazy.
Do you guys see that?
There we go. There we go.
Yikes.
Can you zoom in a little?
Yeah, I think.
And we'll provide the link to that as well. Provide the link.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe we have someone in the audience who can tell us what in the world this is.
Looks like I don't even know. It does not look like a crucifix, that's for sure.
You can purchase that as well?
No, well, you can purchase the image. But whatever this could be, this was long before Pachamama, right? And what do you say to that? Are we all pretty much just, Kevin, we can't hear you.
There you go.
Kevin. I think looks like he lost his sound. Oh, great. Now I have to take over here.
Okay.
Oh, Kevin. All right, well.
Can you hear me?
Okay, I think I'm back.
There he is.
Do you hear me? Yep. Sorry, guys. Boy, the tech last 2 hours, so with how it's gone, so I can't complain too much. No, that crucifix is unbelievable, or not crucifix. Geez, the abomination of whatever that thing is, disturbing. But that's actually interesting. We didn't actually even talk about Pachamama, and that's another one of those. Just it's such a big story that you almost don't even talk about it. But I mean, it was worshiping idols. There's a famous picture of him in the gardens, and everyone's bowing down to this idol in the gardens of St. Peter's. I mean, that's
Bergoglio. See, and I know there's this controversy. Oh, it wasn't really Pachamama, and whatever it was, whatever you saw there in the Vatican gardens was obviously not Catholic worship. Okay,
right?
It was not Catholic prayer, Bergoglio himself referred to these statues, and a quick shout out to Alexander Chuguel of Vienna. Thank you for getting rid of those Pachamama statuettes, whatever those ugly things, nasty things. He threw them into the Tiber. Unfortunately, they were recovered, but still, even that provided us a great moment of clarity as far as what Francis thought of all of that. Francis rushed to apologize, not of course that these awful statuettes were all over Rome's churches, or that they had been whatever, adored, bowed before, whatever it was. He didn't apologize for that. He apologized for these statues being taken out of that Roman church and thrown into the Tiber. That he was sorry for.
Typical.
And he himself called them Pachamama statues. Okay? So you know what he thought was going on there. Okay? When I saw that in the Vatican Gardens, I could not believe what I was seeing just because it was so blatant. It was just like you're immediately reminded of, the golden calf, right? They're dancing around it and they're prostrating themselves to these statues.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever they were not anything Catholic. Okay. I know that the Vatican press conference, they were asked later, so what were these statues? And one of the spokesmen said, well, because somebody had floated the idea, oh, it's the Virgin Mary or whatever. And he said, no, that's ridiculous. It was not the Virgin Mary. He didn't acknowledge it was Pachamama either. He said they just represent life or whatever, fruitfulness and, something like that. And certainly they were, I don't know if they were meant to represent Pachamama, at that moment by the people who were bowing down before it, or if it was more of a generic, representation of life and fruitfulness, but it was definitely not anything Catholic. So, and so many people were scandalized by that, and of course Bergoglio, he didn't care to clarify anything or any, just when the statues were taken and thrown into the Tiber, that's when he came out and said something and basically apologized to the indigenous that their beloved statues had been thrown away. But Bergoglio is quite capable and willing to clarify when he thinks something needs clarification. Absolutely. It's just usually never in favor of orthodoxy or holiness. It's always in the other direction.
He was even asked to clarify the Abu Dhabi Statement by Athanasius Schneider. He didn't care to clarify it. He knew exactly what was said and how that's going to confuse everybody and get everybody on the wrong path, and he didn't care. So,
well, it also the idea of clarifying there, I think, would be absurd anyway, because this is a statement that was crafted by their interreligious experts or whatever. It's not like this was an off-the-cuff statement. This was, long, planned and researched and thought about and debated and whatever, right? So they knew exactly what they were putting in there with all its ambiguity or lack thereof.
Yeah, he couldn't clarify.
It's not
clarify. He can't clarify it.
No, the only thing you can do is retract it and condemn it.
That's right.
But no, you're right. He did tell Athanasius Schneider, "Oh, I meant permissive will." Yeah, sure you did. No, you didn't.
And he followed up and said, "Well, what about sex? You can't. Did God permissively will the sex?" So yeah. He knew exactly where it went.
It's just unbelievable.
Well, and it's a great segue into our interview or our segment with Louis Verrecchio. I'm going to mute these gentlemen. I'm going to do my best to not mess up the tech too much. Mario and Steve will be back if you guys want to stick with us. If not, I understand. And especially, I think Mario is stuck with me. What? Okay, let's do this screen share. Everyone, bear with me here. We're going to do our best. Again, this is not how it should be done. It is simply because we had some big technical issues, but hopefully you guys understand. Guys, he's got a lot of personality. I've really enjoyed following him over the last few years. Came out with a fantastic video about hyper-papalism, which I highly recommend. It's pretty funny. It showed off a very good singing voice, by the way. So he's coming on today to talk about several different points about the Bergoglian supposed papacy. So Louis, I'm going to send it straight to you. I know you have several things you want to touch in these next 15 minutes, so I'm going to let you have the floor.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for having. Sitting back and thinking about this 10 years of apostasy, we could come up with a laundry list of offenses against the church, against Christ, and everything. But I think 4 stand out in particular to me. The first, and not in any order, really, Traditione Authores, and this attempt by Francis to excise the one true Roman rite.
Okay, I'm being told that it is not streaming properly. Apologies for that. I don't know why it's not working. It's a shame because it is a fantastic segment with Louis Verrecchio. Boy, I think maybe it's because my computer can't handle it. Mario, are you there? Yeah, sorry about that, guys. I don't know why that didn't work. I think it may be too much for my computer to handle, unfortunately. What we'll do is we will add the Louis Verrecchio segment so no longer when it's live, we'll add that once it is a published video on YouTube. We'll add that so you can watch that later. It's really very good. I mean, apologies to Louis that it didn't work out. I think my computer just can't handle the.
You could also release it as a separate standalone video.
Good point. Yeah,
do absolutely. Both.
Yeah, no, it's very good. I highly recommend. He had some really good points to cover that we actually didn't quite cover, in really good way of wrapping it up. So we'll definitely attach that. Apologies, we did our best with a kind of a tough hand. Unfortunately, we had some guests that didn't show, and Louis' interview didn't work out, but. Mario and Steve, you guys held the fort. You did a good job.
Well, thank you. Yes, it was fun, and there's so much to say. We've already spoken. This has gone on for like what, 2 hours, 24 minutes now. There would be so much more to say, but 10 years of Jorge Bergoglio, an utter disaster. But I think it's opened a lot of people's eyes. It really has, right? And so for that alone, we can be grateful. Maybe we should just also clarify that even though I, in particular, I know I have a lot of fun here at Novus Ordo Watch and with the podcasts and stuff, just keep in mind that that doesn't mean that we are happy about the situation, right? We don't want this garbage. That's going on. What we want is the Roman Catholic Church as it was known by the whole world through the death of Pope Pius XII. And we have refused to change our religion. We believe what Catholics believed then, because back then already it was true. And if it was true then, it is still true now. And, as for the rest, we can't quite explain what exactly happened or how it happened or how long it's going to go. But we're not going to accept obvious non-Catholics like Francis as a true pope and then refuse him submission. That makes absolutely no sense. Right? So we believe, as Catholics have always believed, and we believe in the papacy. We don't believe in Jorge Bergoglio. It is really that simple. You can either believe that Jorge Bergoglio is the Pope, or you can believe in the papacy. It's not both. Okay, so we choose the papacy over Bergoglio. And I think that's ultimately what it boils down to. And look at the nonsense people have come up with to try to fit the square peg of Bergoglio into the round hole of the papacy. It just doesn't work. And
well, and I think, and it's really important to say too that I think you and I both see it too, and I'm sure we both feel it, that the people who have to do these mental gymnastics, of the R&R or the Novus Ordo, they cannot be happy. They cannot be a fun position either. It must be miserable, because you have to feel. I mean, look at the people who have to try to cover up for their Pope constantly. They're trying to cover up for their Pope. That is so tragically sad that I think that it's something we need to remember too. And I think that we need to again remember how fortunate we are to have the true faith and to be able to practice it, and to know that we will have a Pope someday. We don't know how, but we will. Absolutely. The church will not fail, and it has never failed, and it has not erred, never will. That is a beautiful thing, and that's what they'll never be taken from us. We know that by the promise of Christ.
Indeed. I think we can wrap it up in 3 words. Non habemus papa.
Amen to that. And I'm going to finish wrapping it up by telling everyone to please, again, like, share, subscribe. If you enjoyed this podcast, we will add on, again, for the non-live stream, we're going to add on Louis Verrecchio to the end, and we'll also publish that as its own separate interview. Please share this with your friends. Maybe somebody would, maybe it'll open some eyes. I hope it does. If anyone has any questions, I recommend usually, asking a priest. But if you don't know how to, reach a priest, a traditional priest, go ahead and email me, kevin89davis@gmail.com. I have many priests friends. I will try to reach one who can answer your questions for you. And yeah, well, Mario, it's been a really fun. It hasn't been perfect, but it's been good. We really enjoyed, and also thank you so much to all you guys in the comment section. It's been so many comments. I haven't been able to keep track of all of them, but we appreciate all of you. It's been really great to have you here, people from all over the world. It's been fantastic, and well, Mario, maybe for the 20th year anniversary of Bergoglio, maybe we'll be back and do it again, huh?
Well, hopefully we don't have to wait that long to do another live stream or to do another video together.
That's true, but he's going to live till he's 144, so I'm sure we have at least 10 years from now. I'm sure we can do it again at least.
There you go.
but agreed. I did a live stream with Mario Derksen, watch.org. Go check out. He is the man. Mario, thanks so much. Until next time. And the podcast,
trapcast.org.
Right. Which is also fantastic. And that, I guess that's not a regular podcast, but when it comes out, it's always good.
Yeah.
It's kind of semi-regular.
Depending on how much time I have, what I think I can put together. And, I also know I'm way overdue on a news digest that is in preparation. That's the news digest of Novus Ordo Watch chronicles the infernal chaos of the Vatican II Church, and that's going to come out shortly.
Perfect. Awesome. Sounds good. Go check it out, guys. Everyone, God bless you. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.